invitation and for being here. It's a Thai global especially. So we're going to start on, we're going to talk about generative AI from a technical, business, and investment perspective. Usually when we talk about AI in general, we look at it from silos, from very specific or narrow perspectives. But today we're going to try to bring it all together. But another key part here is, and just like he stated, we really don't know what the future of this technology is going to be. And it's impossible to really predict it. But what we're going to try to do tonight is educate and inform all of you in how it works, how you can use it for your business, how you can invest in it or be part of it, and also the technical aspects of it. So the agenda is, again, we're going to define it. We're going to look at the benefits and the platforms that are currently active. And as we all know about technology, those platforms and operating systems will change. We're going to talk about the technical, entrepreneur, and investor perspectives. And I also want to talk a little bit about the limitations and cybersecurity aspects of generative AI. That is very important. Something that we may not be paying as much attention about, but I feel that we should. And we'll have a summary. And again, if there's any major questions or inquiries, please raise your hand and I'll be sure to take a moment to answer that question. So again, the focus here is to educate and inform, breaking down those components, talking about it from those particular perspectives. And because Vijay gave a great introduction, we don't need to go about these particular areas. But I will tell you this though, in terms of services, I am available as an advisor. I can help with data strategy and literacy. I can help in terms of education. I'm also do public speaking. I've been a proud member of Toastmasters for over 10 years. So I've done this type of stuff on an ongoing basis. And public speaking and communication, as all of you know, is essential, especially if you're an entrepreneur, because that's what delivers the message and also tells a story. I'm also available in any leadership or management and also with the customer journey. So let's get down to it. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. Not generative AI, but artificial intelligence in general. So what is it? In a nutshell, it's all about training a digital self. That's what AI is, right? So we're simply mimicking the way we think, the way we process, the way we communicate, the way we respond, or to solve a problem. We're teaching a digital mind through data from all over the internet of how to do exactly that. That's all it is. And yes, it may sound simplistic, but in reality, that's what it is. And as I go through this presentation, I'm going to show you how and why that's the case. So remember big data in the 2010s? For many of you who are investors or business people or entrepreneurs, you probably heard of big data being the next big thing in the 2010s. Well, guess what? You're absolutely right. It was. However, you thought about it, you were a little ahead of yourselves. But the big data, that massive volume of data that was being collected, was and became the foundation of what we have today in the generative AI landscape. It starts with big data. We use very familiar terms, I'm sure in the technical sphere, data science to prepare it, the machine learning to train and to model it. The deep neural learning is that digital mind, or digital selves. And during the 2010s, it led to natural language processing and computer vision. That is artificial intelligence. That is the very early versions of AI. But what it succeeded in doing was interpreting the data. And from 2022, as you rightfully noted, from November 2022, ChatGPT came out. That led to the birth of creating data. So the point that I want to make here in this slide is that AI didn't just come out of nowhere. It's not a magic trick. It was actually the byproduct of an evolution of work that all of us have done since the 1980s, since the very moment that Microsoft created Excel. That started the structuring and organization of data that we see today. It was a journey journey that lasted 30 to 40 years.
And then Tom, if I may just add,
Yep, go ahead.
I think the way I look at this, and this is why I said the before ChatGPT, after ChatGPT thing. On November, 30th, 2022, everybody, anybody on the street could talk to OpenAI, to ChatGPT, right? So it basically democratized AI. So that's a big difference. Before, it was the purview of the bigger companies. You had IBM Watson, you had a bunch of things. We as a company, we worked on all of this stuff in the past. So we didn't think it was a great thing. We thought, hey, what's big? We've been doing this for many years. But now, anybody, anywhere in the world had access to it. I think that's the big one. So the big one was it opened it up. It opened it up to the general public. And now, if you're a startup, you don't need to have big licensing. You don't need to buy, Watson licenses. Watson started like 10, 15 years back, right? And so it was available. People had access to some of these things. So I think that's the big one. It democratized it. So I just wanted to add that.
No, that is actually a very good point. Technology, especially since the internet went public, because remember, the internet didn't exist, at least in the public sphere, until April of 1993. I actually remember, it was actually April 28th, 1993. I want you to think about how far we've come since that period, since that very day it went public. Some of you may remember Netscape from the 90s. You may remember simple Excel spreadsheets, how awesome it was. Or remembering the flip phones, the cellular data back then. And look how far we've come in 30 years. Think what's going to happen in the next 30 years. That's why technology is such a fascinating topic for all of us. And it's funny because as we all grew up, as we all were raised during this era, we noticed the changes in a subtle way by getting new and better technology and better items and hardware, but we never fully understood the significance of it until now. And for ChatGPT, the minute that came out, as Vijay rightfully noted, it became a mass market tool. Anybody, anyone, anywhere can use it. So now it's not so much about what you know, it's now about how you can apply it. Or in some cases, how to make money off it. So, great point. So the foundation of AI, again, goes back to data. So without data, AI doesn't exist. I'm not going to go through each and every term here, but I'll give you a brief summary of this. When ChatGPT was first released in November 30th, 2022, you may remember that at the bottom of the OpenAI site, it said that the model is only good up until 2021. That's key. The reason is because that program, ChatGPT, will not recognize anything after that period. So if you say anything, well, who won the 2022 World Series, or can you make me something from 2022, it will not recognize it. It'll say, I have no idea what you're talking about, because I was only trained up to that point. And the point of that is that without data, AI will not exist. Every single large language model, and I'll explain more about that later on, is done by the data that we provided. We train the model to function the way it is. Without that training, without all that work behind the scenes, without the infrastructure, that OpenAI or ChatGPT or Google Gemini or even Facebook's Llama will not work. It just won't function. And if you look really deep into some of those large language models, you will notice that the training ended at certain time periods. So if you ever plan on using it for, say, your own product, or you want to create your own business, be very careful, because if the training ended at that period, you can't use it beyond that. There's no data for it. So be very mindful of this. And from that, we have data science with programming, subject matter expertise, preparation. We have machine learning. Machine learning is the key. That's what started this whole generative AI revolution. Now, obviously, it's hindsight 2020, but machine learning was a thing in the 2000s, early 2000s. That's when it really started. That's when computing power started to expand and grow to such a degree that we were able then to use that kind of computing power and modeling. And from there, we developed deep learning in the 2010s, which again led to natural language processing, computer vision, and other types of AI tools, or early AI tools. So the data you have will determine the type of generative AI product or service you need. So be mindful of this. So let's now define specifically generative AI. Well, I think it's safe to say we all know generally what this is. It's that we want to create something out of the existing data that we've put on there. So we input the data, we prepare it, retrain it, and through that brain, the digital brain of deep learning, we create or can generate content. The content could be anything, as we have all seen. There are thousands of products out there now. I've lost count, actually. And for those of you on LinkedIn, you have probably seen posts where people are giving you, 50 products, 50 different generative AI products, some of them free, some of them subscriptions, and so on. So we all know this thing has proliferated. And the key part, though, of how generative AI works, and we're going to talk about it a little later on, is the architecture and the model.
And just talk
go
about,
go.
I think there's one other element of generative AI is the natural language processing part of it. Like
Yes.
The fact that you can talk, like my company, we try to dumb it down a little bit. Our definition of generative AI, it's a little non-technical, is the ability to talk to data. It's a very simple way of doing it. How do you talk to data, right? So if you can talk to data, and I look at this and say, an ERP system is data, anything is data. If I can say, tell me, which customer which of my vendors should I pay now? Okay, you'll go through an algorithm and figure out, okay, these guys, maybe I owe them the most, but you know what, if I don't pay them, they might not cut my thing, but somebody else, there's a chance that they might cut off. So, so it's got the learning portion to it as well, but I'm talking to it in English. I'm not sending like a prompt or anything like that. I can just talk to it. I can, so I think there's that element to this as well, which is the NLP, natural language processing, so which is also something that if you're talking, the key here is, and this is I think one more element that I talk about is, AI is the new UI. Okay, so if you're in the business of developing apps or whatever, there's no more apps.
I can't even keep track anymore of how many there are. It all comes down to three major parts of generative AI, i.e., what is the purpose? One is about productivity, right? Generative AI does help with productivity, right? We do have applications out there. We have different products and services that helps us produce better work, quicker resolving of tasks or issues, and so on, right? We can use it through prompts or existing data. Another part, something that's, again, a very popular part, is efficiency. Now, efficiency, or I guess you want to say optimizations or automation, we all know that's been there for a while now, all right? I can think of Microsoft Dynamics 365, for example, for those of you who may be familiar with that. So it's not exactly a new thing. But what generative AI does is, again, it quickens the process. It makes it faster and better. It involves fewer people to do the type of tasks or workflows or so on. I'm not trying to say to any of you that we don't need people, period. We do need people. I'm going to explain why as we go through this presentation. Because you always need someone there. But you don't need any more, say, 5 or 6 people to do a certain process when maybe 2 or 3 might be best. Especially if you position and create those type of products properly. The last part, and this is probably the most popular part, the one that's really garnering attention, is the creativity part. Right? I mean, we can now create our own art, music, videos, and so on. That's the part that I think is very popular, very well known, something that everybody talks about. That's the noise, as you want to call it, the noise. When we look at the use cases, so we talked about the 3 main purposes. Now we're going to look at the functionality of it. In other words, why is generative AI being used? Or how is it being used for? We look at it with integration. And for developers, for those of you who are developers or engineers, again, I'll keep it simple. All we're doing is we're connecting different applications and products together. All right, that's what that's about. Generative AI can now make this much quicker, it can automate things faster, and it can be much more productive for you. When it comes to development, and this is the part where Vijay made an excellent point, by the way, earlier, it now enables coding to be done to the mass market. You no longer need, in theory, you no longer need education. You simply just have to understand what it is. You can just go on YouTube or some other source and learn how coding is done, or even use generative AI to teach you.
Yeah, just I run a software company, and we actually had to go after some of our developers that got ChatGPT to write their programs, right? So and the programs ran until they had to debug it, right? And then they were like, I don't know, I'm like, how do you not know? So then we realized they didn't write it. So it's an interesting world. So as we go along, we figure this out here.
Yeah, and again, that's one of those limitations. But to start, now you can actually start to play with the code. You can start creating your own products if you want to from that. But the thing is, and I'm sure many of you have seen this already, we're now going or transitioning into that no-code environment. So now it's more about just putting the pieces together. Because of the shortages, because of the sheer demand we have of having those type of engineers and developers, and obviously how challenging it can be to train them and educate them, a lot of companies are now shifting to that no-code landscape. So I'm well aware of this as well. It is happening on a rapid basis now. But generative AI is partly to credit for that transition. Of course, we have content. I think it's safe to say we all know about that part. All right, there's so many different examples like Dolly, Midjourney, ChatGPT, and so on. What's interesting with software here is the GitHub Copilot. We all know GitHub, but they have now a Copilot. This was based on the partnership with Microsoft and also with OpenAI. So now what it does is this product, this AI assistant, as you want to call it, is now able to use GitHub's repositories and create its own products. So it takes your data. Now, there's some controversy there because for those of you who have GitHub accounts or people outside of this are thinking, well, what are they going to do with my product? What are they going to do with my proprietary? Well, that's, of course, a debate now. And we have also seen or heard of other organizations and companies putting lawsuits, like the authors, for example, of the books, of the popular book series. All right? And the other part is also function. Now, this part is starting to grow much more in common. And what function means is for a specific purpose. So resume.io, for example, you can now put in your resume and you can make it according to what you're applying for. Now, look, that's just one example. I know there are probably hundreds of different examples out there that do the exact same thing. That's just one example. But it just shows you the sheer quantity and the, I guess, availability of these type of products out there. But these are the four main platforms being used. Just like any kind of technology, there's always going to be a small group of people that are going to revolutionize and also hold the cards, at least initially. It's like this with any kind of technology. When the internet first came into being in the 90s, we had Netscape, Internet Explorer, and other sites, other browser engines. Yahoo as well. So what happened to Yahoo? What happened to Netscape? Yeah, they're gone because Google Chrome came in and they took market share. How about BlackBerry? Another famous example about mobile technology. When the Apple iPhone came out, that displaced BlackBerry's market share. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, these four are now dominant. Doesn't mean they're going to be around forever. There will be other models. There will be other companies and organizations that are going to scale up eventually. But for now, we have these four. OpenAI, of course, is the pioneer. You will notice that OpenAI, Gemini from Google, and Claude are all proprietary. So what does that mean? It means that we have to send our data to them to run it. That's what that means. if you want to use an analogy, look at Apple's iOS or Apple's Mac systems. Remember, Apple are famous for their walled garden, their ecosystem. So we cannot take any of Apple's code or programs. We have to go into Apple. But Llama is the open source from Facebook or Meta AI. And open source is just like Google's Android, right? Because Android is an open source, remember. You can take Android and make your own mobile operating systems. So what this shows is, yes, new technology appears all the time, but the fundamentals of business, the way we think about business, the way we think as entrepreneurs, will always remain the same. The same structures, the same parameters, the same way we approach things. It's always going to be like that.
And just if I may add, folks, these are, NVIDIA is probably even below this. Okay, so this is below. So NVIDIA is a $1 trillion AI stock, $3 trillion AI stock now. So this is the equivalent of the AOL or Netscape, okay, or the people who were selling cable in the 90s, right? So they were the AOL, like they were laying out the cable for the internet. And then you had the operating system guys. So these are like the operating system guys that came out. Okay, so the Googles of the world, the Facebooks of the world, the Netflix of the world are not here as yet. Okay, so just to put it in perspective, so any of you here, TyQuest or anybody here, it's a huge opportunity that's not taken. I mean, what Tom's saying is these are here, but this is still we're still foundational level. Okay, the actual businesses are going to be built on top of this, right? So that's the part that I think we need to understand. That if somebody's looking at it and saying, "Hey, all the real estate is taken. You know what? I'm going to go do something else." No, it's not taken. These are the foundational building blocks that are being put in place, and some of these blocks might move as well. And as you know, there's huge funding. Microsoft spent $80 billion with a B last year just on AI, and because AI requires a lot of stuff to run AI, you need power, you need computing, you need a lot of stuff, right? So suddenly one stock that I sold, the Brookfield, I thought, who wants power and blah blah blah, and then suddenly AI kicked in. Now everybody wants power, right? So as it always happens, when I sell the stock, it starts going up. So but Microsoft has a lot to play. They are buying these actual power companies as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff, and people are going. So if you guys are looking at this is just the building blocks. Okay, there's a whole lot of that. If you want to add something.
Oh, VJ is absolutely correct. Right? VJ just demonstrated to you the sheer scope and expanse of the way the AI industry is going to be developing and how it's going to grow. Right now I'm just talking about platforms, or what you want to call as operating systems or models. But there's so much involved behind the scenes, stuff that I'll talk about a bit more here, but there's so many moving blocks, so many components. For people who are investors, business people, entrepreneurs, and so on, there are so much opportunities out there. Just because you see thousands of products out there, think of yourself this question: what models are they using? Maybe they're all using ChatGPT models. They're all using OpenAI. If that's the case, then they're all exactly the same. Maybe the temperature, as Vijay stated before, maybe the temperatures are a bit different. Maybe some slight differences, but they all work generally the same. So it's something to consider. Now, I'm going to start with the technical part of it. And I'm not going to go down to the nitty-gritty here. This is a more broad idea of how this all works and why it works the way it does. Data first, of course, is the origin. Now, the data can come from your business, i.e. your drives, your own personal information, or business information, or it can come from the internet, like the case of ChatGPT when it first emerged. From there, the data goes through the machine learning, the data science. But then through deep neural learning, We see here, and I apologize for the way this looks, but over the years, you will see a slow development of key architectural components. First is the variational autoencoder, the generative adversarial networks in 2013, 2014 respectively, and of course the transformers. What those means is those three technologies, those three parts of the architecture is what enables us to provide us with the input, which is you giving a prompt or a question, the latency, okay, or the information going into the model and processing it, the answer, and then the response, i.e. the output. Right? That's how these three were essential. This led to the development of, within OpenAI, of the GPTs, okay? The generative pre-trained networks. The first one was in 2018. That means we had no idea that OpenAI created something as early as 2018. No one heard of it. But they had it, and they were testing it. Another one came next year, and then 2020 was GPT-3. Now it's funny, because GPT-3 is what led to ChatGPT in the first place. So they trained it for 2 years. They thought this was the best one. We're going to use this to help us launch. When ChatGPT itself opened at the end of 2022, they used 45 terabytes of data. For those of you, 45 terabytes is quite a bit. It's a lot of data. Now I want you to think about the sheer computing power. He just noted about electrical power, the computing power, the RAM. Imagine how much, the servers, how much computing power that took to process 45 terabytes of data, 175 billion data parameters for ChatGPT to work. That gives you the infrastructure side of it, what was involved. Right? This part here is what led to the success of generative AI. The sheer volume of work, the effort, the investment. Microsoft put in $10 billion, don't forget, to OpenAI to invest into this. And Microsoft, of course, it paid off for them handsomely. And remember, Microsoft was the butt end of jokes in the 2000s and 2010s, because Apple apparently was the big deal. Well, now we've seen it change all of a sudden. That's how it is with technology. That's how it is of industry, is that things do change. Now, here are the flagship models. Models, now for those of you in data science, models are what's used with data to give yourself a response. You may predict something. You may want to classify something. You may want to determine a pattern or a trend. You will notice in each of these models, they're a little different from each other. They all have a specialty. That's key. With OpenAI, ChatGPT or 4o is versatile and high intelligence. That's a smart one. That's a good one. That's the top. But the GPT-4o Mini is affordable for more focused tasks. So it could be good for, say, something procedural or process or workflows. How about Gemini? We have the 2.0 Flash. That's their flagship. But you will see that on 1.5 Flash, it specializes in generating code and extracting data from that. And I can continue on, but the point here is that each model is unique in its capabilities. If you ever, as an entrepreneur, if you want to create your own company, a generative AI company, or you want to use generative AI, it's very important to choose the right model. Very important. You must make sure that the model itself is trained with data from a certain time period. Some of these models are as old as being trained back from 2022 and 2023, so you got to be careful. When you want to demonstrate those kind of products, it may not have the most accurate information. So be very mindful of that. And these models will continuously change. New models, more capabilities, more specialties will always occur, regardless. Because for these companies, that's what gives them the revenue. It's what keeps them relevant.
It's not a no-brainer as yet, okay? So if you go to a company and say, I'm going to, you can use AI instead of human power, there is a cost of AI, right? And that's why we have the Mini. Because the cost of using ChatGPT, and we do business in low-cost geographies like India, the cost of AI is actually higher than the cost of putting a person on this, right? So it is not, unless there is, so you got to find, AI is not a one thing solve all problems thing as well. So if you need high horsepower, really highly intelligent smart stuff, you don't put that to, a low intelligence, problem. So that's where the GPT Mini comes in, or any of these ones. So it's two things. It requires less horsepower. It can run there, and I think friends here at Risk, you want to raise your hand? Okay, so they're autonomous. They're like the what do they call it? The Amazon Go, right? The stores where you can just walk through. So they're the equivalent of the Amazon Go thing. So Risk is also one of our participants in our TimeQuest last year. The winner, yes. And they have a store at the end there. Okay, so I just wanted people to just understand, they have an AI model. Today, their AI model runs on the cloud. Now, what's the downside of the AI model running on the cloud? It takes time for it to process. It's not real time. So what's holding them back from doing this? Cost, right? They've got to have a GPU here that can do all that processing here. So yes, it can run. So this is how you will have to design systems. Now, if you want real high power processing, there's cost involved with it. So if you can have a low cost kind of model that can do the same, you could take that. It can be mobile. So there's trade-offs with everything, right? So I think that's the, that's I think as we get into details, if you're building an AI business, you'll have to think about a lot of aspects of how to design this. And if money is no constraint, hey, let's put a server on every kiosk, right? Now, would it make the business case? It probably wouldn't, right? So that's that. So unless you got something like the Mini, that was cost effective. So I think people are already thinking about this. What are the models? How can people consume this, right? AI. When we started off, we had one consumption model, right? Everybody drink at the same thing. No, now it's like, okay, everybody drinks at this, is not going to work. Let's have, thing that shoots smaller cups of coffee, whatever, So I think that's where we're going with this, and different kinds. The pricing is also going to change.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Sure.
I was just wondering, is Twitter's Grok another operating system, or because Llama is Facebook? Because Twitter is Grok, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's going to be many companies that you're going to see, like Twitter and others, or X, I guess you want to call it, whatever. We all call it Twitter. It's going to be one of these models. It will be one of these models. And that's the part I want to emphasize here and kind of dispel the myth that none of these companies, they can't develop their own models. It's impossible, at least for them in terms of cost. He just stated it correctly. I want to highlight what he said there. It's a lot of money to generate that kind of data, the sheer size of it, and continuously run it and train it to generate those responses. So far, to my knowledge, because remember, things will change, these 4 companies are the only ones that can do stuff like this. In particular, if you want to look at mobile, for example, Llama 3.2 is the best to run on mobile devices. So if you want to do a mobile application based on generative AI, you want to use Llama 3.2. Yes, OpenAI, Gemini, they're all popular, they're all great. But in terms of performance, accuracy, cost effectiveness, and so on, you want to use Llama 3.2, which is an open source. To do that, you're going to have to hire or bring in experts in that particular area. So just like we did before with software, like we did with iOS or Android, you got to bring in those engineers or developers that know those particular areas to develop those applications. That part hasn't really changed. What did change is what you are using to develop in the first place. And to add on to what Vijay stated as well about the expensiveness or the expense of getting those responses, we all know that every response incurs a price in forms of tokens. I'll give you a brief little part about tokens. Tokens came from transformers. You saw transformers developed in 2017. Guess what company developed the transformer system? It was Google, not OpenAI. It was Google that brought out the paper. Google that did the research. Google that formulated the way the GPT model should work. OpenAI took that information and created it. Because Google didn't have the capabilities. They did the research, but OpenAI brought it to the finish line. It's fascinating history if you go in depth about it. Sorry, you had another question, sir.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
So, do these guys have deals with both the oil companies for natural gas, or however they're going to power it, but probably natural gas, with AMD, with like these data centers? So, would each one of these platforms have their own data center deal?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they have that's why Brookfields, all the power companies are going to up in price. All utilities are going to go up because we need power, we need data centers, we need all that stuff. And there was the whole blockchain stuff. People were doing Bitcoin mining, right? That was a big push for power and for data centers. But
Yes.
we're now going Bitcoin on steroids, way more than that, right? So this is many times more than that.
Absolutely correct.
It's a sense of the need for power. 3 Mile Island. Who knows about 3 Mile Island? Okay? Not a very good experience in the accident that took place. There's a company called Constellation Energy that owns 3 Mile Island. They're reviving.
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft just did a multi-year deal. I think it's $20 billion US to access it. 3 Mile Island with uranium. So if you've got a uranium operation, you're in business, okay? So just to give you a sense for the level of investment and the reach to get that secure source of power, which we're all sort of taking for granted. Anyways, carry on. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
Yes, sir.
that's okay. Go ahead, sir, please.
Just one thing, if I may, to help potentially. Just one thing, if I may, to frame this maybe a little differently for people in terms of zooming out a bit. So the way I look at this is 50 years ago, we had the mainframe computers. And there was one mainframe computer, that's where Unix came from, was around time sharing. So it would be the size of like this room, one computer. And so if you were the PhD student, you would come in at 4 a.m. because that was when there was cycle CPU time available. And then at 8 a.m. the cancer researcher would show up, at 9 a.m. as the business person, and 10 a.m. as the politician, and so on and so forth. There was just one computer. And so the way that I think of this is, what you're talking about with these 4 models is 4 mainframes as a service. To build a mainframe, to maintain it, to power it, to do all this. There are 4 mainframes as a service right now, and there are barriers to entry for anybody else that wants to come into that space. Doesn't mean nobody ever will, but they have a large running start. So.
Absolutely, and there's people with AWS is also have something that they're working on. So there's people out there that said, if you can throw money at it, yes, So if Elon Musk comes in and says, there's already working on an AI company. So they are. So if you've got, I would say not billions, tens of billions of dollars. It cannot be even in the small billions. It should be in the big billions, right? IBM has been doing this for some time, so they've not really gone public with it. But they're getting into a very niche, smaller niche area. So I think that there is. So who will be the last few standing? That's the question. Now where are we going to put our bets on? Now most applications that you use if we were to build an application, when I go to a customer site, we're not building a OpenAI only model, right? We would build a model that can we can swap we're using this as mainframe, as you said. It's a swappable resource. We can say, you know what, I don't like the results I'm getting from OpenAI, we're going to swap to Gemini, or we're going to swap to Claude, right? So what is going to happen is, the money is going to be made in the application layer, in the layer which is actually going to be, providing so these are not actually solving problems. These are a means to solve the problems. But the people who are going to solve the problem are the people who are going to get paid, right? And this is, I always give the example of, how many of you use a software called Kayak? It's a meta search engine to book tickets, Kayak, right?
Yeah.
Kayak.
I used it.
Yeah, Kayak's a very thin layer on top of Amadeus and everything. Okay, it's a very thin layer. It just controls the customer experience and builds the customer. Right? Everything below is done, the heavy lifting is done by Amadeus and all those guys. But the market cap of Kayak is 10 times Amadeus. Right? So anybody that can take this and solve a problem for humanity are the guys who are going to make money. Right? So these things are swappable. Who knows? Do you know what they're using Amadeus? They could use something else. Right? Who cares? Right? So Netflix until recently, like a couple of years back, was using AWS servers. Right? I mean, they were using the AWS cloud. Now they have their own cloud. But does it make a difference to us? It doesn't make a difference to us. Who cares? Right? So this should be almost a commodity. This should be in the back. We'll be paying for some service that solves some problem for us. And in the back end, they would be using any of these.
Yeah, and we have, and before we go to your question, some very important points here to make. He is correct. Sorry, I didn't get your, what was your name? Josh. So Josh raised that about the mainframes. Yes, this is pretty much what this is. These are mainframes. They're like the equivalent of computer operating systems, like Windows, Mac, and so on. Like that's pretty much what they are right now. It's a self-sustaining type ecosystem. And we know that places like Microsoft, Apple, Google, they've pioneered and in some cases also monopolized the market in terms of their ecosystems. Same thing with Amazon. So whenever you go or purchase products within those ecosystems, in a way you're kind of stuck because that's what you need to use. It's very hard to migrate your data or information to and from. The same type applies here. Remember, these models are different. You can't transfer Llama 3.2 to 1.5 Flash very easily. Not only that, but you also need the right APIs. Right now, as he stated with Kayak's a thin layer. That's exactly how many of these products currently out there, generative AI products, exist. They exist with their own user experience or user interface, but the API is built on whichever system here they decide to use, whichever model. And they say, hey, I create a product. It's so awesome, it can create things. But you go below that and say, well, where is it from? Where's the data? How'd you use it?
And lo and behold, you're going to see that it's from these models. These aren't all the models, by the way, everyone. These are just the top ones. OpenAI, for example, has about 15 to 20 different models to choose from. So if you go on their developer portion, you'll see a whole list of models. But these are just the top 3, the most recent ones that are available. And I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean to stop you. Go ahead. Yes, please. Yeah.
Thank you. So that is the point. To relevant to the startup world, I believe there's a big opportunity in terms of API, you just mentioned.
Yeah, APIs.
Many niche industries, not just, you're not thinking only of mobile and thinking about UI and AI. A lot of industrial applications, a lot of specific niche use cases where not a lot of people are looking at. You're solving easier problems, a lot of harder problems to solve, which requires taking a data set in a specific industry, training that model in that niche, for example, an AI agent, in terms of conversational AI is one thing, but industrial applications especially has a lot of opportunity, but not a lot of people are solving it. I just wanted to add to saying the application over the infrastructure is where the money is. So
Yeah,
just want to add.
exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Sharing that. That is also essential. You need the subject matter experts. You need the people that know that field and that area in order to really succeed in creating a particular product using generative AI. And I'll talk about that more later on. But where I want to go to in the next couple slides is about the way the generative AI is delivered. This is the stuff that I'm sure you have seen because you've used it, but now I'm going to explain the background behind it, how it works. So I did talk a little bit of the prompt engineering part, and this is now where things are really, we're going to go more into a deeper dive into the way generative AI can be delivered or how you can use it as a business. And believe me, this stuff is not as hard as you think. The first is known as Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG. You may have heard about this possibly on your LinkedIn posts or amongst your social circles or business circles. But really what it is that instead of using the internet to get your responses, you can use your own data, your own information, which is really good, especially if you own a business and you don't want to go through all your emails or go through all your documents on your OneDrive or your Google Cloud and try to find what you need. So what you do here is, as you can see with the process, it relatively works the exact same way, except instead of using just simply the internet or whatever is on ChatGPT, for example, we are now using your own files and documents. So you can take your files, your multimedia files, anything, load it up, and then let's say, for example, you're at a workplace and your boss contacted you and said, I need a presentation done on this topic, on topic A, in the next, let's say, 2 hours. Obviously, it's hard to do a presentation in that short of time. So what you do is you take, let's say, your previous presentations or your PDF documents or Word files and so on, put them all together, and OpenAI has this, by the way. You can go on there, and then you can say, generate for me a presentation. Be very specific with your instructions. Remember the prompts, be very specific. And say, I want a presentation on topic A as a occupation, like say who you are. You're a business analyst, for example. And I want to present it to a blank audience. Maybe your executives, maybe your manager. And you want it to be these many slides, contain these many topics, I want this and this done, and you just make your description. And guess what? In less than a minute, it will be done. All you got to do is go over your slides and make sure everything makes sense, which is very important, by the way.
Until recently, they would say, hey, what are you guys smoking? I mean, this doesn't, we can't do this. We're regulated. Or we can't send data to the LLM, to ChatGPT. But RAG is to the rescue there. So what RAG does is basically, it's a container, right? So you're using the power of the LLM, but you are not taking, so now let's assume you've got data that came in from, I'll give you an example of if you're a company and you have multiple insurance policies, right? And nobody reads his insurance policies, right? So if you wanted to, you wanted to look at his insurance policies, you would put them into a RAG and then ask a question, does my insurance policy cover, let's say, when they're helping here, like some clause for cyber liability, let's say cybersecurity or some fraud, right? Does my thing cover that? Right?
Yeah.
So now you could also do this by dumping this whole thing into ChatGPT, right? You could do that, but guess what? Now ChatGPT knows the whole open model now has learned your insurance contents. So by doing this in a RAG, you're using the power of the LLM to only work on your documents. So your documents are not, there's no reverse feed, and you're not help build the bigger LLM model as well. So this is how insurance companies, all the regulated people, in fact anybody, any business that doesn't want their information to be out there is using the RAG. So this is, I think, very quickly the template for consumption of generative AI now.
Exactly, and
The best part about this is, number one, it's cost effective. It's not that expensive to do. Number two, it's actually not that difficult to prepare or to do. It's not like you have to code something and create an entire application. Like, I'm not kidding, it really isn't that difficult. You simply have to go to the OpenAI playground. It's called the playground, and yes, I know, I don't know why they call it the playground, but that's what they call it. And you can go, from there you will see a list on the menu. It says chat, AI assistant, and so on. Go to AI assistant. From there you can prepare your documentation, your information, you can load it up, and then you, through an API, you can connect it to your website or to your own computer or system, and then you can start using it. Right now, from what I've seen, the healthcare professionals as well as the legal field are using this quite a bit. As a matter of fact, lawyers recently, there was an article I read where they're trying to use RAG to help them preset their arguments, preset their course cases, preset any prior arguments or any prior information they can lay their hands on. So instead of having paralegals looking over thousands of pages, now you have something like this that you can literally access within moments. And you can get all the information you want. And it'll be accurate. You know why? It's your data. It's your own information. So it's taking it, it's like Google on steroids. So instead of Google having 1,000 sites popping up, you can now, with 100% confidence, get your information that you're looking for. And this is just the beginning. This is the very first. Because, as I've noted here, these developments mimic the way Apple revolutionized applications. Apple's success with their iPhone is not because of the iPhone itself that Steve Jobs famously released. It was the apps. It was the ecosystem. When the App Store got released, that was what revolutionized mobile technology. Because it's what's known as that long tail, that ecosystem, where people can go on the App Store and get any app, any application they need to make themselves productive. Right? That's key. So now, agents, it's what's starting to take over the market. AI agents. Now, what are they? This is a very conceptual way of doing it. I really didn't want to go too much into technical details. However, what it is that agents are basically, and I've talked with some people here and I totally agree with them, it's really a digital worker. That's what it is. It's a digital version of yourself, a digital employee, really. And what it does is it performs actions, tasks, responses, and so on. Great thing about them is they work 24/7. They're available at any time. It could be 1 in the morning, 6 in the morning, lunchtime. It's there. And what it does is it's a goal-directed behavior. It will learn from experience. So consider it as a very miniature version of neural learning. Remember, deep learning is what led to the large language models in the first place. But in this case, we now have a smaller version of that where you can give it data, tools, memory, planning, and models as an agent to then provide you with the information, the output, and responses you require. The way it works is, as the user, you would prompt it, as you always would. However, this time, it goes through multiple sequences, very similar to the way we ourselves think. The perception, for example, the perception in human terms for us is the environment, the sensors, our audio, our visual sensors, what we're looking at. That's what the machine does. The AI agent will sense what is going on. It'll give a context of the situation. The context of the situation, I know some of you are a little puzzled. What that means is it's the prompt. So when you give it a prompt, you're giving it a request, you're giving it the context, the situation, what is going on. For instance, I need to finish a project by this date, but I don't know how to solve this particular problem. Can you help me figure this out? Something like that. We're looking here at critical thinking now, everyone. Analysis. So once they determine the context All right, and that's where the tokens part comes from with the transformers. Remember, we talked about this with Google, right? What Google revolutionized is it was able to break down the words exactly the way we would portray it. For example, it will break down the variables in recognition. We would break it down, remember, into nouns, verbs, adjectives, and so on. Guess what? That's what the AI agent does now. We told it it's a noun or a verb or an adjective. We mimicked our own behavior. That's why I said with AI is a digital version of us. From there, we go through the cognitive part. What that means is the critical thinking aspect. So in our brains, the way we do things, we have a problem. Okay, what do we do first? We set objectives. We think about what is our goal? What are we trying to achieve here? From there, it goes through strategies and plans. It will literally go layer after layer of plans. And I've seen it work. And from there, it will then do a decision. So based on what you've trained the model to do, what you trained the AI agent to do, it will then generate the action. The action are the tasks. It will then tell you a list of what you got to do to finish or solve that particular problem. Now, AI agents are very popular right now. Still in its infancy, though, but we are now seeing it more and more in the market today. Again, it's trained by a number of different factors. And as Vijay rightfully noted, there's a lot of computing power, infrastructure, and so on being involved behind the scenes for all this to work. Remember, it's not a magic trick. It's done by lots of hard work, lots of people, despite this whole craze about automation and everyone losing their jobs. It's not about that at all. Right? It's about getting things done faster and better with quality.
And Tom, if I may,
But
how many of you heard Satya Nadella from Microsoft say this, like 2 weeks back? SaaS is dead. Okay, so he says SaaS is dead, but guess what is going to replace SaaS? Agentic AI. So agentic AI is going to replace SaaS. So what does it mean? Like if you went to a website and you did, okay, this was a SaaS website that did something for me, you don't have to do that anymore. You just go to an agentic AI solution in whatever manner it is. You could get to it through Siri, through Alexa, through whatever. But once you got to it, it will do your work for you. There is no interface. There is nothing, right? So that whole thing about I'm going to build a website, I'm going to build an app, that whole paradigm is going to change. I mean, it's not going to change like right away, but we're already seeing signs of it. But I think that's where we are, and I think is this all very clear? There's people, it's early adopters, people are embracing this, but I think to say that it's like by all the websites are going to be dead by tomorrow. No, it's not happening. Okay, it's going to take some time, but at least the direction. And Tom, like to hear your views on this as well. So if don't throw in the towel if you have a website or something. Don't shut it down. Okay, so don't close your apps or anything. It's going to happen. But I think until then you can AI, embrace AI, bring AI, infuse AI into everything that you're doing. But you don't have to drop the UI portion as yet. Okay, but the jury's out there. Okay, this is the general direction. But I would say it's a good couple of years out there before this becomes ubiquitous. But it is probably, if you're going to spend a lot of energy, make sure that you're not rebuilding a website or rebuilding an app. Okay, so maybe take those dollars and time into AI and try to find some way to infuse AI into what you're doing.
that's why I said earlier about how this is the very early stages of this particular development. AI agents or agentic AI is the first of what's going to be a really great leap forward in the way we do things. It will definitely transform the way we look at our work, the way we do applications, and so on. Now, instead of having 5 or 10 applications or 100 applications on your phone, you're now going to have maybe 100 AI agents that are going to work together. They too are going to need APIs and connectors and so on to talk to each other. So again, the technology itself, while disruptive, again, fundamentally, the structures and really the fundamental concepts of it remain the same, just like how, Josh, you stated about mainframes. I mean, we go back decades, generations, to the first computers. And computers today, they still have that fundamental logic. It still relatively works the same. This stuff will also work the same. It's just the technology, the advancement just continues on, just like it always has. That's what I want everyone to understand, is that we're all not going to be unemployed. We're not all going to lose our jobs. We just have to adapt, like we always do.
You go to the some of you I sometimes go to to have go to a bank on a like end of the month or beginning of, I forget now, it's end of the month, it's a whole lineup of people, right? And I'm like, what are these guys doing? They're there to pay their bills, right? And I'm like, why do you need why do you go to the bank to pay the bills? Because for them, that agent does that for them. Say, pay my bell bill, pay my hydro bill, pay my and that actual human agent does that for them, right? So today, if you were to go into, if we said, if I had an agent that did this for me, right, go pay my bell bill, pay my, I don't have to log into Toronto Hydro. I don't even have to log into my thing. So that's the equivalent of this. You have agents that will do these things. So I think, and how does agents work? They know context, they know everything. If it doesn't work, they'll come and say, hey, you don't have enough money in this account, right? Think of it, that's the same thing that the human agent in the bank would tell you. They would tell you all this, so they understand context, they understand all of those different things that you would put in place. So this is, I think, where the future is going to. But they would be able to almost mimic the human.
Now I want to go into the entrepreneur stuff. Let's talk first about the statistics. Let's look at the industry itself. There's a McKinsey global survey done last year. Almost 2/3 of people already regularly use AI. I guess there's no surprise there. I think it's safe to say we all know this already. What they are predicting, though, which is going to be in itself fascinating, is that they will eventually perform at the median level of human performance by the end of this decade, in the next 5 years, basically. That means the digital agents, the agentic AI, is going to be able to perform just like we do on an 8-hour workday. That means we can double our productivity. And we all know Canada has a productivity problem that could potentially change our GDP, potentially change the way we look at our socioeconomic system.
And this is so.
Yep.
A lot of the countries that have the power of humans, right? In a way, it democratizes that. Canada, with only 40 million people, can hit above its size by the fact that we leverage AI. So we don't need, we might have lost out on the demographic. We might not have as much of a demographic dividend as some of the bigger countries, but I think we can make up with AI.
So many possible ways we can, the way this can transform society, transform the way we work, live, and play. And the predictions, this one really shocked me from Bloomberg. So Bloomberg did a study where not last year, but the year before, 2023, the industry was only worth $64 billion annually. That was the revenue. By 2032, it's going to go to 1.3 trillion US dollars. Never in human history have we ever seen such a leap in terms of investment or revenue. Never. Not even a dot-com boom in the 90s. Never have we seen such scale of the growth. And when we look at it from a business perspective, under StatsCan Business from last year, we see that 2/3 helps of the people accelerate developing of creative content, how it increases cost efficiencies about over 1/3, and almost 30% help them with their data-driven decision making. So there's already a lot of great benefits with generative AI today. And there's a law here from the government of Canada that helps run this particular area. There's also some guidelines in Ontario, principles for responsible use of AI, as well as Ontario's trustworthy AI framework. I recommend all of you to read that up, because in terms of the regulatory and compliance area, legally speaking, these are the areas that you have to abide to. That's what you have to be compliant towards if you ever want to create a generative AI type business here. And here's a thing about education, because I love education. In the Future Skills Center, over half of students already use generative AI frequently or occasionally. Now, we've heard about debates in today's society about schools. Kids not allowing to use their mobile devices, for example. Or even at the college level, where I am, where they can't use generative AI with their courses. For understandable reasons, by the way, academically speaking. But at the same time, if you think about it, we're also tying ourselves with one arm. If this is going to be the future, if this is where things are going, shouldn't we be educating them then? Should we be teaching our kids and our young adults of the future, should we be teaching them how all this works, how it functions, how they can use generative AI for their own career, their own professional lives, or their personal well-being as well? So these are things that we all have to think, not just in terms of entrepreneurs or business people, but also as a society. And if we look at, so, go ahead.
Just on the previous slide.
Yep, go ahead.
One thing that I think, our default, I used to say the death of the web, the death of search, right? I'm a little old school. I still hit Google first, okay? But the younger kids, they hit ChatGPT first. There's already a change in the behavior of people. So any of you who are building models and building businesses that are, that are still built on, let's get to number one on Google. Guess what? I mean, that's not where people are doing searches anymore. Right? So there is a whole change in the way people are consuming content. So I think that's something to really look at. Google first ranking doesn't matter as much anymore.
Components. This is the part that we've all talked about already, and I'm not going to regurgitate or extend this, but there's so many parts and pieces in the way generative AI works in the first place. So when you invest as an investor, right, I'm talking about investors and entrepreneurs, don't just think about the product, about how to make something more productive, more efficient, or more creative. Don't just think about the purpose within the business, but think about what's behind it. Below the ocean, the iceberg, the rest of it. Look at the data, where it comes from. The infrastructure that houses that data. The cloud servers, the power needed to even run it. How about the computing power? Those supercomputers, for example. How about the data science, the machine and deep learning that those professionals know how to do those models in the first place? How about the platforms that are behind or are the byproducts of those models? How about the way we integrate, connect, or use APIs? All of these things matter. So in a business setting, as an entrepreneur, you can pick any of these areas, specialize in it, and you can gain market share because there really aren't that many out there right now. People ignore it. They don't pay attention to it. All they pay attention to is the wonderful apps that you can go on a website or download and start creating stuff. But where does it come from? It's like anything else. That's what we all have to think about more and understand it. And who knows, someday, someone here or elsewhere, as Vijay rightfully stated before, maybe a new language model might be created. It could topple the 4 other ones. Maybe there could be a new server, a new way of doing things. And there's one thing that we always forget that's also looming in the shadows, not in a bad way: quantum computing. Well, what role will they play? Because right now in Waterloo, as we speak, they are developing a technology that has been tested successfully. Google has already successfully tested quantum computers in the States. So it is coming. And how that's going to change the way we see all this, we don't know yet. But there are more disruptions on the way. That's what I want us all to think about.
if used by bad people, it's got so much power, it can break any password in a few seconds, right? So now you've got to create passwords that are quantum computer proof, right? So this is now where, so you've got to be, I think we're talking cybersecurity here, Saitana mentioned this. So the new, your security doesn't just have to be in the realm of the possible today, but the realm of the possible of the future, right? And so if any, bad actor gets access to quantum computers, there's a lot that they can do. So I think that's, again, there's always going to be a fight between the good and the bad actors, and as long as the good people stay, at least a foot ahead or an arm's length ahead, I think we're definitely in a good spot. But I think just wanted to put that out there, that I didn't realize how important this was until I met a friend of mine that works in the security business, and their whole claim to fame was to create quantum computer, unhackable passwords or whatever, unhackable systems.
Yep, exactly.
And again, it's in the future. It's not exactly here yet, but we have to be mindful of that. But for now, looking at the entire way, the components of how this all works, and of course cybersecurity there, which I'll talk a bit more about later on as well. Now, this is a great way. I wanted to really share this with the entrepreneurs here and the business people, is getting involved. What that means is, where should you start? What area do you think you want to be part of? Well, there are many areas. Data, for example. There's always a need for data warehousing, data storage, data warehouses, and so on. All right? It could be primary data, the ones that you collect. It could be secondary data from other sources, structured versus unstructured, business versus internet. For infrastructure, power, of course, electrical power is key. Computing power, quantum computing as well, perhaps down the line. How about the data science machine learning part itself, the models? Remember, the large language models itself, that's what drives all this. That's the engine, right? The training and testing of it. How about the platforms, proprietary versus open source? For some of you who maybe love programming or love developing, instead of creating apps, like mobile apps traditionally through Android or through Apple, maybe you can develop a Llama application using the generative AI. Remember, it's open source. You can take it and you can create your own application just like you would with Android. And you can use it on the App Store or Google Play. Through integration, maybe you want to specialize in APIs. You can develop further or additional APIs. Maybe you can do it between models, between those products. Remember, right now, there are no APIs between those platforms. None. They don't exist. But if some of you may think and say, hey, maybe there's a startup out there, maybe they specialize in doing this kind of stuff. That will also make you money, because now you can migrate your data, your models, your information from one platform to the other. And believe me, that could be good money. How about products and services? Now, I understand out there's a lot of products. Of course, that's the thing we see the most, I think, out of all of these. But do those products really work the way it should? And in addition to that, does it fulfill a certain function or purpose? If it's just general use, it's not going to be worth much to you. We've seen advances with healthcare and legal, and I'm sure other industries will follow. But that's an area as well. What I'm trying to say is, don't surrender or give up, or don't, excuse yourself from what you already know in the past. You're a subject matter expert. You have your academics, you have your degrees and your diplomas. You can use that with the data that you know to make new generative AI products and services. I tell this to my students when I teach them. I say, don't ever dismiss what you've already learned. Don't ever give up or surrender what you already know. Because, and we all know this for a fact, education data, healthcare data, financial data, they're all different. Different variables, different ways of analyzing or predicting what could happen, forecasting, and so on. So I'm not a finance guy. I don't know what I know the financial data, I understand it, but I don't know which variables are more important than others, for example. But you do, one of you might. And you can use that to create your own product. And for specialties like AI ethics, cybersecurity, maybe internal policies you can do, compliance, regulatory. Believe me, there's a lot out there still that you can take on. These products, the majority of them you see on LinkedIn and elsewhere, remember, it's just a thin veneer. It's not what you think. It's not like the market's saturated. People sometimes take the easy way. But the people with the expertise, the know-how, the skills, the confidence, the empowerment, you can create these products. I strongly encourage and support that. I think it'll be better for everyone.
One big thing is geography, right? So there is, if you find an app that does very well in the US, guess what? It's a land grab. Now, just get that idea, bring it to Canada, right? Take that idea, go to the Middle East. Take that idea, go to the UK. Right? So there's you know, and then pray and hope that the guys in the US give you enough lead time for you to build your business, and until they come there, right? And sometimes they come there and they buy you out. It's easier for you to sell it to them. So, hey, there's a model in everything. Right? I invest in some startups in India. So the whole claim to fame was, I'm India's Airbnb. I'm India's Uber. I'm India's whatever. That's all. That was their claim to fame. They didn't have to do anything. Until in some of these places Uber came to India, and then they didn't actually, they took some time for them to succeed, but they then had to buy somebody or whatever. But essentially the same thing will happen in AI as well. There may be some models that might be successful in some other model, maybe not in the US. You will be able to bring that there. I think that's where we're losing people now.
we gotta keep going.
I'll just be brief. These are just some sample profiles. I didn't just pick these because they were, I'm not saying successful or anything like that. I picked them because just to kind of provide a broad avenue of how all this looks in terms of the way the market is, in terms of the usage, what they offer, and how they're classified and where they're located. Okay, so all these are various examples. Clio, of course, is the legal business one. That's Clio Dual. I told you about the AI offering of that. That is what they're working on right now.
And then they just raised $800 million, if you're keeping track.
Yeah.
They're one of our newest unicorns in Canada.
They are, yeah. Clio's doing really well right now. All right, now we're going to go to the investor part, all right, about the trends. So in the last few years, we've seen general functions being the primary way of delivering generative AI products to the market, i.e. productivity, efficiency, creativity. We've seen these type of products as examples. I'm not saying these are the best ones. I'm just saying these are examples. And there are thousands of them like this out there right now. But what I want to highlight here in the next 5 years is that the focus now is going to go towards more custom, more individual, and more profession-based. So instead of having a more general or broad landscape in the way we deliver things, it's going to be much more custom, much more individual focused. And the approach here is this. Through personal, an AI assistant could be created for your use. Now, right now, as just a broad example, there's Microsoft Copilot. Or we know about Microsoft Copilot, right? It's on for those who have a Windows computer, it's there. But here's the difference with this. Microsoft Copilot doesn't fulfill your needs. It's just a tool. It's like, I'm going to slap a ChatGPT branding on top, and I'm just going to throw it on a Windows computer to get people to buy it. But someday, somebody, somewhere is going to create, could be an AI agent, could be a RAG, and they're going to start selling it as an application for your laptop, just like how everyone else does it. Remember, Adobe they're famous for their documentation, the way they document things. So don't be surprised if something like that appears, or you may have the idea of doing it. For custom, we look at specific use cases to increase accuracy and context. What that means is very specific purposes. It could be a personal choice, maybe something about yoga. It could be something about shopping at Costco, for example. It's just like when you go to the App Store now, Apple's or Android's Google Play, you try to find an app that matches your interest. And just like Vijay stated before, don't be surprised if we see a bunch of AI agents all of a sudden appear saying, hi, I'm your AI agent for Costco. I will help you shop and deliver a certain product. Or, hi, I'm your AI agent for well-being. I will help you improve your well-being, your mental health, for example. These things can and will occur. And for profession, again, we've seen this already happen with Clio and other companies or occupations or fields. This is happening. It is growing bit by bit. But again, don't dismiss yourself. Just because there is an AI out there doesn't mean yours can't be better. We look at history as an example. Where's Netscape and Yahoo right now? Where's MySpace? Remember MySpace? That was the first social media site. Where is it? I don't know where it is. It's gone. How about Blockbuster and Netflix? That's a famous example. How about Sears? Remember Sears in the Christmas catalog? Sears could have been Amazon, but they didn't do it. So again, there are ways to create better agents and or applications for yourself. You're the subject matter expert, don't forget. You have a specialty in this. You can get a team of doctors and create your own application for this, or own AI agent. It is very much possible. Just make sure you have the data, the trust, so the ethics, governance, the value, and the models. Yes, sir.
So I take it that both of you are sitting on the edge regarding the bad guys. You're saying we'll move ahead as far as we can go, and we can always catch up to the bad guys. Is that what you're telling us?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, that's been proven over decades in terms of any kind of occupation, economic system, or what have you. There's always going to be competition. That's the way we live in a system of competition. There's always going to be another company ready to take the market share. And we've seen this happen over and over again with any kind of industry. Remember, these 4 platforms are around now. Doesn't mean they're gonna be around forever.
You know,
So go
I
ahead.
think Mateo's question is more around bad guys, people using this for wrong means, to do something. Yeah, so he's talking about, so very good question. My question, go ahead, why don't you go first?
No, it's okay. That's actually related to the cybersecurity part I was going to talk about. But it's going to be an arms race, to be honest with you. That's what's going to happen.
They're already doing this you can have Gen AI generated calls, right? People are calling people and saying, calling older people and saying your grandson's in trouble in the voice of the grandson and saying, please send me some money, right? So this is already happening. So this is not, they're already doing this. And I know people who have paid money. I mean, people have paid money. I don't know how, but any newcomer that joins my company, they get an email from it almost looks like my email. It's not telling them to send some store cards. What are they called? Store credit. Gift cards. Yes, yeah. Gift cards. And until now, only one person fell for it. Okay, but one person did fall for it. And she actually did send the money. She sent these cards. So I mean, if it can happen, it's probably happening at a much bigger level. So the fact that
I wouldn't use you.
Sorry?
I would not try to hit you with that.
Okay.
So don't think I'm bullish and thinking, oh, generative AI is wonderful and everything else. That's yeah, it's great, but we also have to look at it fundamentally. Right now, in my viewpoint, we're going through like the dot-com boom in the late 90s. Everybody wanted the website. Everybody wanted to buy domain names. That was how it was. And then it crashed. Didn't collapse the market though, but it corrected it. And then from there, we saw a steady increase of the internet and its byproducts, i.e. mobile, cloud, and so on. So I think right now we're going through, I would like to say some kind of bubble right now with AI, because everyone's, like you said, everyone's crazy about it. Everyone's crazy. But, and this is why we see all these products and services out there. Again, going on LinkedIn or other places, you're going to see, oh, here are 50 free products for you to use. Obviously, they're not free. I mean, there's probably hidden costs underneath or ways to make money, you know, advertising, cookies, data collection, and so on, that happens behind the scenes. But eventually, that will all correct itself like all markets do. The market will correct itself. When that's going to be or how long it's going to be, I'm not sure.
That's what I was going to ask you, is when do you, if you had to estimate, what
Yeah.
would be,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
if you had to estimate, if you had, when do you think that equilibrium or that inflection point would take place? Is that something that you do see happening, or are the dynamics going to change before then, and we kind of just would be foolish to assume that we know the outcome of where this really goes?
It's difficult to say. And
It's
it's difficult to say, and I want everyone to know I don't like to make things up. I like to tell the truth, and I honestly do not know when that correction could happen. I will say it will happen. I'm pretty certain of that part, but how and when and what context or circumstance, I'm not sure. But this is what we're witnessing now. That's why I'm saying when it comes to the product and service part, and this is kind of where the criteria comes for generative AI as a segue, is that when you're looking at investing in something like this, right, and you're looking, the key topics here for data, architecture, modeling, privacy and security, business function, look at where the data is coming from, what the product and service consists of. Really ask hard questions. What's the architecture? What's the models? What kind of model are you using? What platform is it coming from? And if they don't admit to you or they don't want to admit to you, that means there's something wrong. It's a red flag. I like to say if one of these aren't answered properly to you, that's a red flag in my opinion. It's not safe. It's not a good maybe thing to bet on, because you're going to need all these different things. Now, I'm going to say this. When it comes to these areas here, the business function, you're all business professionals, you're investors, you're entrepreneurs, you know this stuff, you understand it. This here, like these three parts here, have not changed. It's the exact same questions you would ask any. What's your revenue? What's your profits? What's your expenses? How much you're going to make in 3 years? How many people you're going to hire? What's your, how many people have you employed, and so on. All these questions, absolutely, you never change. Like that you should keep. That's your professional expertise, right? Which should be utilized at all times. What I want to add on to all of you is the technical and security aspects. Make sure that they're compliant. They have plans and policies of cybersecurity. Give you a demo, right? Offer a demo. I'm sure you do this already. But as an investor, say, hey, I want a demo. I want to know how this works. Show me everything. Show me from front end to back end how this all functions, why it works, how it works. That way, as an investor, you can make an informed decision and make good decisions as well, because it's your money, right? I know as investors, you want to help people succeed and thrive and flourish. But at the same time, you want to make sure that they know what they're doing and what the end game is going to be, right? So this part is important. Now the limitations, we're almost done, I promise. I got 4 more slides and I'm done. So I'm just going to run right through if that's okay, Vijay.
Absolutely.
All right, for limitations, we've talked about some of these throughout this presentation. We have dependency. Remember what I said to you about data. It has to be good data, quality data. What that means is it has to be clean and accurate. Can't be dirty or raw data. You know the saying, garbage in, garbage out with data, all right? Terrible data, not going to work, okay? You want to have the appropriate models. So remember, with those platforms, choose the right models. Make sure those are the models you're using. And for simplicity, by the way, sometimes right now, generative AI does still have a hard time, right, about providing solutions to complex situations. The AI agent is where that's being developed, but it's still going to take time. Because remember, you got to train it. You got to teach it. It's just like with any of us learning how to drive a car, ride a bike, learn to read, and so on. It takes time. You've got to train it. You got to train the machine what to do, especially when it comes to higher order thinking. With accuracy, I'm going to tell you this when it comes to generative AI products. If anyone ever tells you that their product is 100% accurate, run. That is not true at all. There is no such thing as a 100% accurate product. That is ridiculous. All right, in data science, what I've learned and what I've done is whenever you do a model of any kind, you're going to have scores, accuracy scores. Some will be poor, some will be really good. But they're never, ever going to be 100%. So if anyone ever tells you it's 100%, yeah, run. Don't believe them. All right, it's ridiculous. All right, you got to verify as well. For bias, there's going to be bias, all right, like anything else. All of us as humans, we have bias. We have our own way of thinking. We have a pre-assumptions about things. So there will be bias in the way we use our generative AI. So when you're setting up your generative AI products, you're going to make assumptions. And those assumptions are going to generate the responses that you yourself are expecting, not so much the customer or the client. So you got to be mindful of that. Understand the market. It's just like when you're selling a product or you're marketing a product. Understand the demographic. Who is your target audience? And design the product according to their needs. For hallucination, we did raise this throughout the presentation about hallucination, and that's when you put some prompt on ChatGPT, for example, and it makes up something, regurgitation and so on, depending on the temperature. Higher the temperature, the more random it gets. Sometimes, if you put the temperature at 1.0 and you do a prompt, it's just going to give you a bunch of letters and numbers. That's it, alphanumeric. That means the ChatGPT, the large language model, doesn't understand what you're doing. It's basically AI run amok. It's like Skynet. All right, it's gone amok and doesn't know what it's doing. And finally, security. And we're going to talk about security in a moment. But data from the internet or other sources can reproduce malicious code. So let's say, and I know I've said this already before, and I'm going to kill myself for this, but when you have people now creating code, and they're able to create their own applications and so on, that code could not be up to date. It might be a little bit depreciated. If it is, it means a hacker or some other bad actor could create a virus or a malicious code that could then infect your system. So you got to be mindful of that. It actually happens. Because remember, ChatGPT uses everything from the internet, good and bad. So you got to be mindful of that. And when we look, now I want to go to cybersecurity as the last major part. So cybersecurity, it's an essential part. There's 5 major components here. But the way I want to do this is, what they're targeting is your data or information. That's what's going on right now. And the way it works is we have software, hardware, data, people, and networks. It's important to secure all 5 of these areas. That involves a multi-pronged, interdisciplinary approach. It's important for any tech company to have a working cybersecurity policy and framework. And specifically with generative AI, and I've said this, or I mentioned it already, it's an arms race. And why is that? Well, because bad people, as Vijay noted, and yourself have noted, more people can create malicious code. They can say, create a virus, and I want you to put it into a phishing attempt. That's what it can happen. There's nothing that those people can do. And it's becoming much more sophisticated because it's learning. The machine can learn. All right? It's like if you teach someone to be bad, well, they'll be bad. So you're teaching a machine to be bad, it will generate malicious code and start infecting systems. So there's better phishing campaigns. There's deep fake social engineering. They could take your Facebook account that's public and run a completely deep fake campaign without you knowing. Again, through generative AI. However, at the same time, the support is we can better predict risks or threats. We can create AI agents or assistants. We can accelerate containment and resolution. We can identify vulnerabilities with generative AI. Again, through AI agents and AI assistants. That's why I'm saying it's an arms race. It's an arms race because these two poles are going to come at each other all the time. It's going to just escalate as the years go on and things become more sophisticated. So the strategy here is around people, develop policies and frameworks and rules, both at home and at the workplace. When it comes to data, make sure you have a backup system with your data. Make sure you understand where it's stored at. Because some people store data in other countries, which might be illegal. So you got to look into that as well. You also have to understand your infrastructure. Have a plan, an incident response plan. Make sure you know what you need to do if anything happens. We have seen so many cyber attacks lately in so many different ways. For development, make sure when you're developing anything, and that's part of your startup or being an entrepreneur, make sure, I cannot emphasize this enough, make sure that you have a cybersecurity policy and cybersecurity workings within your products. Don't ever, ever ignore that, because you will pay in the long run if something happens. Anybody is at risk. There's no 100% guarantee there. It has happened many times, and it will continue to happen. So to summarize, finally, I'm sorry it took so long, but to summarize, and I'm sorry because I wanted to give you so much information, generative AI is part of the overall AI ecosystem. It has evolved and developed over the past 10 years. We're just hitting the very beginnings of what's to come. There's many working pieces around it. Right now, we have 31% planning to adopt it this year. We already have about 60% of Canadian companies using it. So it's safe to say, by the end of this year, almost the entire Canadian economy, every business to some form or degree is going to use generative AI. Again, to what purpose, to what end, and of course, to what expense, we're not sure about yet, which is, again, totally understand. The focus before has been productivity, efficiency, and creativity, but that's going to change towards a more personalized, more customized type of centered upon the AI agents, them suiting to your needs, to your individual expectations. Remember about the regulatory, legal, privacy, and cybersecurity policies. Make sure you're compliant with those. It's very important. And there's still many opportunities. You just have to figure out where in this entire ecosystem, where do you belong? Where do you want to fit into this? And once you figure that out, you can then grow from there. So I want to thank you all very much. I'm very sorry it took a while. Vijay and I were kind of going back and forth with each other. But I sincerely appreciate all of you here and listening to this. I know it's a lot of information.